Dragon Ball Z Final Sand, also referred to as Final Sand, was a very popular Dragon Ball game on Roblox in late 2017 and early 2018. It was a Dragon Ball game that was very unlike others at its time, offering a character creation scene and multiple different races that you could play as. It offered a lot of techniques and transformations for multiple different races, which was pretty unheard of at the time. With a remaster on the horizon, I wanted to take a step back and look at this game for what it is, 5 years after Snake World eventually stopped updating the game. I wanted to look at why this game was so popular in late 2017 and early 2018, where anime games were just not popular on Roblox. The only other game that I could think of as quote-unquote rivaling Final Sand would be Dragon Ball Rage, but Final Sand offered such a unique playstyle that it definitely stood out as one of the most influential Roblox games of all time. I wanted to see why it worked so well, and why people eventually stopped playing despite it. Being an anime game in 2017, it was more or less just a glorified bandit beater type of game. You would go around doing different quests, beating up groups of randomly named enemies. I can remember like having to fight Cybermen or Evil Saiyans, Evil Majins, really whatever Snake World could think of to have you fight. And you would get Zenny and XP from it, and you have to kill so many of these enemies before you could get that XP. And it was a very straightforward play style for a game, but I think it honestly worked really well for being a Dragon Ball game, where you are going out and fighting people and trying to get stronger. Like, it's not insane exponential growth instantly. You're slowly becoming stronger by fighting more and more enemies. On launch, there was only the Earth world, which kind of made sense. Snake World wasn't going to drop a bunch of different maps on release. I mean, he didn't even know if this game was going to be successful or not. Earth was interesting with its NPCs. Starting off the game with having a very high key resistance for basically almost all of the enemies on Earth was an interesting concept. Especially considering when you get onto a Dragon Ball game, first thing you want to do is either turn Super Saiyan or shoot a Kamehameha. And when most of the enemies can just kind of tank your Kamehameha, it's a little bit of a weird concept to go with, but clearly it turned out fine. I think the game definitely had a lot of charm in its beginnings. You spawn in at Goku's house, and the first quest you get to do, or you can choose to do, because this game is very open with what you can do, but it encourages you to talk to Chi-Chi, where she gives you a quest to go and beat up a bunch of snakes there in the yard, and also go and deliver Gohan his lunch. And once you got to Gohan, then he would give you his own quest. I really like this kind of like linear progression in Dragon Ball games on Roblox. It was nice to know what the game wanted me to do, but Snake World also offered you the option to go and do whatever you wanted. You're not forced into a singular like storyline whatsoever. If you want to go out and fight the hardest boss on Earth right away, you're fully free to do so. You just know that you'll most likely lose because you're level 1. There are a couple other quests on Earth that kind of reminded me of this initial early game charm. Like, there's one where you have to go get an autograph signed by Krillin for one of the quest givers. There's also one where you had to deliver a package to Roshi. I really did like getting to interact with the world of Dragon Ball, because that's what these quests felt like. Like, I was getting to interact with the cast and actually live in the world a bit. It does kind of upset me that this concept was a little bit lost as the game went on, but as a first impression, it definitely did make me like the game a lot more, and it's part of why it hooked me. In terms of the actual character creator aspect of the game, we were initially greeted with Saiyans, Earthlings, Majins, Namekians, and the Frieza race, which is basically just what Xenoverse 2 had. The transformations for each of these different races were kind of interesting. When it came to the Saiyans, they were pretty much a no-brainer, just give them their Super Saiyan transformations. When it came to the Frieza race, they decided to use First Form Frieza as a base form, so even though technically Final Form is Frieza's base form, instead in this game you would be able to transform into his second, third, fourth, and then eventually his golden form. But when it came to every other race in this game, the transformations were a little bit weird. So the humans were able to use the Kaioken and Ultimate forms, it was referred to as Mystic in the game, but no other race was able to do these things, even though both this transformation and technique were usable by basically anyone. But the Namekians and Majins honestly were done the worst out of everyone. They had forms based on literally nothing from the actual series. This was before like Potential Unleashed Piccolo and Orange Piccolo, and I guess the Majins still really don't have anything when it comes to like Boo himself. But I'm also happy that the Namekians and Majins weren't treated like in Xenoverse, where they have very bad transformations and there's no reason to ever use them. So It was interesting to see his take on how he would handle transformations for both of these races. Another thing that I wanted to touch on about the core concept of the game is how bad beams are in a game that's about Dragon Ball. The Kamehameha should be like a very good technique, but honestly it's not that good in this game. Beams in general just aren't very good, because if you're doing like a raid event, you're gonna hit everyone but your enemy with the beam. And more so, it leaves you so vulnerable and open to enemies that can honestly just one-shot you half the time, that charging up a beam to full strength, even though it is basically the strongest move in the game, it can be, it doesn't really matter in the end because you're kind of dead before you even fire it. It is worth mentioning though that this game had beam clashes before Xenoverse did. Just gonna sit there and let you take that in for a moment. The game had really great foundations, even on its launch, and going forward you could definitely see what Snake World was going for. I mean, he had a whole timeline set out from almost, if not the very beginning, on what worlds he wanted to add, what he wanted to cover, and how he would tie the game all together. And it wouldn't be very long before the first major update of the game, being Namek, coming out only a couple weeks after the launch. When it comes to Namek, I truthfully don't have that much to say about the planet. It was a very fun part of the game in my opinion, and it introduced a lot of cool concepts like what I would consider the start of the raid boss. I think that Frieza being in the middle of the planet and having to have like 10 people to take him down was very cool. I think that it forced a lot of interaction between players and helped this game build a greater community, knowing that Frieza was such a great threat, and with the daily quest of you having to beat him, everyone would have to come together to defeat the guy, and I think that was a really cool concept. Though playing at the time, having to fight off everyone that was trying to spam like Kamehamehas and you were just trying to use your melee moves on Frieza, it was kind of awful. But honestly, getting that close to Frieza in that time was kind of an instant death anyways, to be fair. It introduced the Ginyu Force and Zarbon, who were different bosses that you could fight also. I definitely do appreciate Namek because it focused a lot more on bosses, and even though it kept like the same bandit beater types, it at least let you deviate from it a bit, which bandit beaters aren't really the most interesting thing, so I definitely welcome that. Moving on to Space's release, this is actually when I started playing. I believe that I started playing a little bit after the release of Space, because I remember having Super Saiyan God Goku be like the banner image when I first loaded up into the game. But actually, my opinions on Space are almost entirely negative. This part of the game genuinely just sucked to play through and sucks on replay. The map is really big, and you get a space pod to travel through the entire thing, but once you actually land on the planets and start exploring and looking at all the quests that you can do, there's really only like 1 to 2 quests per planet, which places it having actually less quests than Namek, but it is a lot bigger, so I guess there was that, if that's your kind of thing. I also think that the scenery on some of these planets were pretty cool, and I think it was a step up from Namek in terms of like scenery, but also Namek is kind of a boring place anyway, so I guess it really wasn't that hard to top that. It introduced bosses like Beerus and Broly. I think Beerus was kind of a weird addition to have as a boss this early in the game. I mean, he's a god of destruction and you're fighting him at like level 200. I mean, in terms of Saiyans, you're like a Super Saiyan 3, and though you do unlock Super Saiyan God at level 270, it's just kind of like a major jump, and it seems like Snake World kind of understands this, because he made Beerus hit really damn hard. Like, he can one-shot you half the time. And Broly really isn't much better because he has an insane amount of HP and he only hits slightly less. So I don't really know what the idea was with these bosses. And Broly was a green quest. There really wasn't that many people trying to fight him most of the time. I mean, with Beerus you could get a bunch of people together and that was definitely fun, but Broly was kind of awful to fight against. I mean, even on like my level 600 android slot, he's a pain in the ass. The XP that you got for completing quests in space was actually so bad that Snake World went back and buffed all of the XP gain, which was definitely a good thing, because getting through this part of the game would take you several days, and in comparison, you could get through like Namek in like 2-3 days of a normal playthrough. Space also just kind of involved a lot of like different races and species that had nothing to do with Dragon Ball. I mean, it touched on like Broly, Beerus, obviously. It had Yardrat, and also you could go to Namek and Earth from space, but it didn't really have any other races that we knew beyond that. I mean, obviously Dragon Ball cosmology isn't really the best if you actually stop and like look at it, but it's really not that interesting of like a world at all, because almost everything's just fan-made. Only like a month later after the space update, Snake dropped yet another major update, that being the future. The future was based off of the Goku Black saga from the Dragon Ball Super anime, and there were so many ideas here that were genuinely implemented so well. It introduced a lot of bosses like Fuse Zamasu, Goku Black, getting able to fight Goku and Vegeta for the first time, Future Trunks, just a lot of emphasis on bosses here, which I'm obviously for. It also played with ideas like fighting the future androids and a perfect cell that somehow happened, I don't really know. They even had references to a popular Final Sand YouTuber at the time called IB Main, and having him defeated by Golden Frieza, which I guess is a nice touch because I think he had a Frieza Race character. I don't really remember. It's been like 7 years. In comparison to Space, which definitely had a lot of cracks in the Bandit Beaters style of gameplay, Future seemed to kind of turn it around actually, focusing a lot more on bosses and having to work together with others to take them down. I remember there being raids at like the Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta fights all the time because they were actually daily missions. Obviously there were still Bandit Beater type fights. There's a lot of references to the community with like hardcore grinders you could fight, Namekian human fusions, all kinds of different like Kaioken masters, just stuff like that I think were a fun nod to like the player and the community. I mean, even the bosses in comparison to Space were a lot better. I mean, they were definitely still very difficult, but if you try to fight them by yourself, it was definitely possible. And I think like at least comparing like the main boss, which I would say is the corrupted full power, whatever the hell, Fuse Zamasu, it is so much better to fight than Beerus because he at least hits a little bit more like graciously and can't just one-shot you right away. Continuing with the monthly update schedule, Snake ended up dropping the Tournament of Power update in early 2018, actually before the conclusion of the anime Tournament of Power, which would conclude in March later that year. Basically, you would go in with a team of 10 and fight almost every single enemy that is in the Tournament of Power, and after you defeated every single one of them, you would get to fight Jiren as the final boss, and it was really difficult. It would take you like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It would even take some people an hour. I was one of those people. But you would have to genuinely get like a full team, get them fully statted out. You need to get them with sensu beans, everything you could. You had to prepare for this event. And that was a really cool concept at the time because there wasn't really like a lot of difficult stuff to do other than just fight hard bosses, but that's just kind of a gauntlet. Like if you didn't have sensu beans, you really couldn't heal. And none of the bosses were really pushovers in this either. I mean, there was a lot of difficult content, like fighting Super Saiyan Blue Goku, Vegeta, having to fight Kefla, which was genuinely awful, having to fight Hit and Golden Frieza, which were like on the lower level, but they could still give you a run for your money. And obviously Jiren at the end. I mean, at this point, most of your team's probably dead. Obviously, due to being before the conclusion of the Tournament of Power in the anime, didn't have like Master Ultra Instinct Goku or Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta or even full power Jiren. So it was honestly like kind of outdated within its 2 months of release, but it didn't really matter. It was a fun game mode. After the Tournament of Power update came out, there really wasn't a lot of content that came out for the game. I mean, going from a monthly update schedule to having a gap in updates from January until April where they decided to add androids as a playable race, it was a little bit crazy for the game. I don't really blame Snake for this either, considering the fact that the anime had concluded in March and there really wasn't a lot of Dragon Ball content other than the anime at the time, besides the manga, but that hadn't caught up yet. There wasn't really a lot of Dragon Ball content that he could do without going into GT that Snake had already said he wasn't interested in. In mid-2018, Snake ended up releasing another world for the game, that being the Secret World. It was the first major addition to the game since the beginning of the year, and it was interesting to say the release. It kind of resembled like the other world or Hell in Dragon Ball Z, having bosses like Gogeta and Janemba that you could fight against, also having the full Ginyu Force there besides Ginyu, which was a filler part of Dragon Ball Z, where they kind of went to like King Kai's planet and fought the Z fighters there for some reason. But also, the world ended up including like Champa and Beerus that you could fight, which you couldn't fight Champa before, so that was cool. It was just kind of like an amalgamation of a bunch of different ideas, and I found it interesting. It also happened to include two popular memes of the community at the time, being Gohan Blacko and El Hermano, which were definitely something. These bosses just suck to fight against, I'm gonna be fully honest. I mean, going in even with like a level 600 slot, they still hit really hard. And keep in mind that you got into this world at level 350. They hit really hard. And another boss in this, which is considered one of the hardest bosses in the game, was 1% Frieza, which this boss, from what I found out, is based on one of Snake World's friends, and it was kind of like a joke boss thrown in alongside Gohan Blanco and El Hermano. But this boss can really one-shot you at like most levels, so I mean, have fun fighting it. It's not a fun boss. I don't think this world is fun at all, other than like Gogeta and Janemba. That's about it. It has like 6 to 7 missions, but beyond that, it's not really all that. It just kind of gets you from level 350 to 400 quickly, and honestly, you can basically skip it if you don't really care about it. Throughout the year of 2018, people discovered a technique called red bean spamming / stacking, where if you dash at a certain time, you would be able to use more than one red bean at once, meaning that you could get your damage into insanely high numbers, making most of the content in the game a complete cakewalk, including the Tournament of Power, which you used to have 10 people to do. Now you could do it with just one person. This made grinding in this game a lot easier, and Snake eventually noticed this, patching out what was actually a glitch, but he received such widespread community backlash that he ended up rolling back the glitch and let it stay in the game for the foreseeable future. Funnily enough, the red bean spam glitch was actually most beneficial to everyone else but Saiyans, based off of how red beans worked. Essentially, your stats would be doubled from your base form. Considering that Saiyans had the weakest base form in return for having the strongest transformations, they benefited basically nothing from red beans. However, androids who had no transformations, but instead had insanely high base stats to make up for it, were basically indisputably the strongest race in the game all of a sudden. It was a complete 180 from Saiyans being very good to being completely worthless in a game about Dragon Ball. It was honestly really funny to see, but also a little bit disheartening. At some point, this game did just evolve into a bit of like an XP grind fest, especially after the Tournament of Power update, where you would just keep on doing the same event over and over again, which wasn't really that different from just doing daily missions over and over again. But especially with Prestige being a wish that you could make after completing the Tournament of Power, where you would keep 20% of your base stats and get reset back to level 1, but in return you would have access to better and stronger and just different transformations in general, but also have enemies be stronger towards you. It definitely added a lot more to do in the game, and playing through the game multiple times was definitely not a downside whatsoever, as the game was incredibly fun, but it did just kind of reinforce that grindy aspect of the game. And the Broly movie update that we ended up getting in 2019 definitely reinforced that even more, as Broly was just a singular enemy that you had to fight, and he would give you an insane amount of XP. Snake had abandoned the Discord server by this point, as he was kind of done with the game, it seems like, after the Tournament of Power update, but continued to update it because the game had widespread appeal, and you could actually see in some of the announcements channels when this update was coming out that they were kind of against the carrying aspect of the Tournament of Power, where one person would just go in and do all the work for everyone. They actually had caps on like how much XP someone could get if they didn't participate whatsoever against Broly. They would just not get XP if you didn't hit Broly at least once, and you could also get kicked for AFK really easily. So it was kind of funny to see them try to work against that aspect of the game, but that ship had already sailed. It's kind of funny to see them try to do anything about it. One of the last major updates that we had was the Hard Tournament of Power update, where it added the Jiren race and obviously the Hard Tournament of Power / True Tournament of Power. It was basically just another version of the Tournament of Power, but updated to the end of the anime, so it included like Ultra Instinct Goku, Full Power Jiren, and just a bunch of stuff that was at the end. It had 3 wishes that you could make, and one of the wishes was just nothing, because why add an incentive to completing this actually very difficult event, where even at the peak of red bean spamming, it was still very difficult to complete. The other was you could wish for the God of Destruction form, which was similar to Mastered Ultra Instinct. Actually having higher stats was just kind of crazy because it was a free transformation compared to the 1.2 million Zenny that you needed to get Mastered Ultra Instinct, which, by the way, was 12 tournaments of power with the Zenny. You could also wish to go to heaven, which completely negated the entire purpose of grinding in this game, because it was like an infinite level world where you just go and get like infinite XP from genuinely anything. I really don't understand why this world was added, and there's really nothing you could do with it either, because Rebirth, which is a way to like basically prestige your character, but in the form of you going from heaven back to the real world. That update wasn't out till November, and there was really nothing added in between. And even when Rebirth was added, that was really all that was added. There was nothing interesting about it, it was just prestige but better. By 2020, the community was pretty restless, and Snake hadn't really dropped a lot of info on the game recently, or updates. So he ended up releasing the Zeros World update at some point, and this update was not well received whatsoever. And in my opinion, it is the worst update this game ever received. For starters, he removes red bean spamming, which was detrimental to the health of the game. By this point, a lot of bosses incorporated the damage that you could do with red beans into their HP pool, and after removing the spam technique, it was just very difficult to defeat any of these bosses in a reasonable amount of time. More so, Zeros was a completely original world created by Snake. I have no idea where any of these characters came from, and it had nothing to do with Dragon Ball whatsoever. You could drop it into any single Bandit Beater game on this platform, and it would fit just as well. And the answer is it doesn't fit well at all. It was like a random alien planet, and there was definitely other ideas Snake could have worked with at the time, because the Moro arc had just been finished, but I also think I can't bash him too hard for it, because you can't really do that much with Moro other than like adding a raid on Earth, which you don't really want level 1s trying to fight Moro, when this was supposed to be like endgame content. This was the solution, by the way, to like what to do after the hard tournament of power if you decide to stay on Earth. You're meant to go to Zeros. But by this point, the XP inflation had become so bad that when you're trying to read the missions, you can't really tell how much XP it's supposed to give you. You don't really get a sense of how much this is and how much it means. And it just ended up introducing a boss that was so insanely overpowered that it makes no sense to ever fight it when you can just go do Broly's like forever and ever, or just go to heaven. If you really care about getting XP that much and getting up to like level 1000 or 2000, just go to heaven. It's really not that difficult. This world didn't really do anything for anyone, and I don't know why it even existed other than Snake saying, damn, fine, here's some content for you. It was just a really big disappointment to go into this world and just kind of not find anything interesting whatsoever. I think more so it's disappointing that this was kind of the last update that came out for this game and the legacy that it left behind. This update was just not fun, and I don't know what it did for anyone. It was just a completely optional world that was not interesting in any regard, and it just, I don't know, did not hit right. After this point, being like a 2017 Roblox game, and it now being 2020, the game was completely taken over by exploiters. It was basically impossible to not get into a lobby with someone that was using a script to auto-complete the Tournament of Power, or auto-defeat Broly. I mean, literally everywhere you went, someone was scripting. Either level 2000 people that started the game yesterday, people with infinite stats, or people auto-completing some of the most difficult content in the game, like I just said. I don't know. There was nothing done about any of these people, by the way, up until like very recently, because the game was completely abandoned. It's kind of just been no man's land for the past while, which is very disappointing because I saw new people trying to get into the game and just being like automatically killed because someone was just using a script that instantly kills everyone in the lobby. So that's kind of saddening. After this, we actually got confirmation of a remaster in 2021 from Snake World himself, but after this announcement, there was kind of radio silence in that department. In 2022, we got confirmation that it was still being developed, and he actually introduced a bit of the dev team, and who was mainly working on it. But in 2023, Snake ended up coming back to the project full-time and putting other projects on hold so that he could give this game his full attention, which I definitely appreciate. And I'm happy that he did that because a lot of progress has been made since he came into the picture. In 2024, he ended up posting a Q&A about the game, which I actually participated in. And in 2025, we finally got some major news. He started updating some of the worlds in the original Final Stand, which you could find a way into the Discord server for the new remaster, which I was one of the first people in also, so kudos to me. He announced pretty quickly in the Discord that there was going to be a combat test in March to figure out the kinks of the combat system in the game. I tried it out. The game is genuinely stunning. I genuinely adore how the transformations look in the game when it comes to the Saiyan characters. Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan God look beautiful. I really hope he reworks how the Frieza race looks because they're honestly incredibly ugly. I really wish I could unsee them. Snake World also introduced Snake Way as a way to get into the beta test, for free, this was definitely something. You had to cross like 15 hours of trek just to get into the beta test, and only the first 10 people could get in. And only after 10 hours in, he announced that if you ever benefited from anything like an auto Broly script, you would not be allowed into the Victor's Pool, which is genuinely insane because it was almost impossible to not accidentally get into a Broly auto script at this point in this game's lifespan. He also ended up announcing in mid-2025 that if you paid 10,000 Robux, you could also get into the beta test. He thought this would be a way to like root out people who didn't really want to play and also keep the beta test pool very small. But he then went on to say that all the progress that you make in the beta would not transfer over to the real game, and there would be no benefit to you spending the 10,000 Robux. For reference, 10,000 Robux is roughly equivalent to 100 USD. Nobody is paying that except like YouTubers, but YouTubers already have access to the beta tests, if I remember correctly. So I genuinely don't know who this is for, and I guess I'll just really have to see if people actually pay for this. I hope no one does, because this is genuinely egregious. I mean, I understand wanting to keep the beta test small, but having no benefits for spending $100 on a beta test that's supposed to be open for 3 weeks, come on, that's a little bit ridiculous. Really, the only conclusion I can come to is that I'm of a different social class, because even though it's not games all the time, and that's YouTubers are entire US, backside of the remaster, I'm still think it's a good deal to spend $100 on a remaster beta for like 3 weeks at most, and doing it like early. I think that's a good deal. That's a good deal. I feel like even $20 would root out most people, but $100 really? Who's this for? Keep in mind that I was recording this on like September 1st, so I'm not really sure at what point this video is coming out. Hopefully before the beta comes out, and that this isn't all outdated by then. But this is also pre-game launching, so hopefully people can look back at this video after the remaster launches and kind of see if this is their first time ever playing Final Stand. Kind of see how the game was beforehand and kind of see some of the hype leading up to the remaster, considering it's like 4 years in the making. All I can say is that I really do hope it comes out this year, and making a little bit of a guess for future self, I'm thinking a November release date. Hopefully I'm wrong and it's sooner, because I'd really like to play this game, but I don't know. It's just kind of crazy to me that when I first played this game, I was just so young. Like, I don't really want to say how old I was, but let's just put in perspective. I'm in college now, and I'm still talking about this damn game. Definitely was a very influential part of my life, and being a huge Dragon Ball fan, this game was a lot of what I wanted, being like a kind of an RPG style in some ways, and being able to create my own character and like go through the Dragon Ball world and unlock a bunch of different transformations. But I think that's also why I didn't really like playing as like a Namekian or a Majin who had a bunch of like fan-made transformations, and also why I really hated the Zeros world and how it was the biggest mistake this game ever made. But I really hope that the remaster takes back in a lot of the charm of early Final Stand with like all the connections to the Dragon Ball world, which I see in the sneak peeks it kind of already has. That's kind of all I have to say about Final Stand and like its rise, fall, and kind of hopefully rise once more with the remaster, but I guess we'll have to see if Snake World actually cooks or not. I sure hope he does, for one, but I condensed a lot of information to only 30 minutes. So if I had to give you some suggestions, if you wanted to see some different eras of the game, definitely check out a YouTuber like Ultra Hands. I watched a lot of Ultra Hands growing up. But yeah, that concludes this video. So have a good one, y'all, and hope to upload in a timely manner again. I mean, I'll probably make a video on the remaster if it ends up coming out, and hopefully some other stuff, because I'd like to get back into making videos a little bit. I mean, this video was pretty fun to make. So have a good one, y'all.